Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we talk about supporting students with disabilities in CTE. My name is Michelle Aber-Giffen. I work with the National Center for College and Career Transitions, or NC3T, and I'll be facilitating a discussion today with two featured speakers, Wendy Chalmers, the Learning Support Teacher at Suntech, and Carla Timmons, the Special Programs Coordinator at Lenape Tech. We have two goals for you today. Our first goal is that you learn some practical strategies for serving students with IEPs in CTE. And second, we'd like for you to walk away with some knowledge about where you can access additional resources for serving all special population students in CTE. So to briefly go over what to expect in today's session, I'm going to give a brief overview of the Pennsylvania CTE Best Practices Initiative and its focus on CTE special populations. I'll give some background on strategies to support students with disabilities in CTE, and then we'll hear from Wendy, followed by Carla. And then we'll have time for some Q&A at the end. And we also will do questions and answers after Wendy's presentation and again after Carla's presentation. And so as I mentioned, NCT3 has been working with BCTE on the TAP Best Practices Initiative, the CTE Best Practices Initiative. And last year, as part of that work, we focused on serving students from special populations. So under Perkins 5, there are 9 categories for students from special populations. They're listed here on your screen. And today we're going to focus on this first one highlighted in yellow, individuals with disabilities. As part of our work with the Best Practices Initiatives, we convened a Special Pops working group during last school year. The working group was composed of about 20 people, so it was made up of practitioners and administrators from across the state. And we really focused in our meetings on identifying the primary challenges and then effective strategies for helping students succeed in CTEs, but students from special populations. We're convening the working group again this year, and the focus is going to be on taking those strategies and the information and the research we collected and developing some training modules for new CTE teachers so that they have a resource and some strategies and tools for helping students succeed. So as part of our work, we had the working group, and we also developed some resources that I think you might find helpful, and I just want to draw your attention to them today. So all of these resources can be found at the website listed here on your screen, pactaresources.com. The first resource is a resource guide. So that is a repository of publications, research at the national level and at different state levels related to special populations. The second resource is this working paper, and this came out of the working group and out of our discussions. And that paper lists strategies for each of the different special population categories, strategies that are effective for helping these students. And the paper is organized by each of the categories, and then it also has a broader strategy or category we called cross-cutting strategies, and that touches on strategies that apply to more than one category. And then finally, I want to draw your attention to what we call the TAP profiles. NC3T has been working with BCTE on these profiles for several years now, and there's probably over 100 of them. And they document promising practices across the state. So what's going on in CTCs across Pennsylvania. And we have a section devoted to special populations, but we also have several other categories. So if you're interested in co-op or student engagement or assessment or adult CTE, you can go to this website and click on profiles and see what your peers are doing to better serve students. So before we dive into strategies and Wendy and Carla sharing with you all, we had a couple of questions we wanted to ask you. And the first question that we'd like you to answer is, what is your role or your position? And if you can use the chat tool at this time and just type in your answer to that. Great, thank you. So we have administrators, we have learning support teachers, counselors, researchers. Excellent. Okay, great. The next question I'm going to ask you, hopefully, let's see, there we go. How many of you work directly with students with IEPs and CTE? And for this question, just go ahead and use the raise your hand icon at the bottom, and we'll just get a sense. So we have about 60 participants, and it looks like about 20 or so have raised their hand for working directly with students. Okay, I'm going to have you go ahead and put your hands down. And we have 2 more questions for you. So those of you who work directly with students with IEPs, how many of you would you say have specific strategies in place to meet their needs? So something that your CTC or you yourself has really focused on and implemented that you think is an effective tool or strategy. Okay. Okay, so not too many hands. So hopefully Carla and Wendy will provide you with additional resources. And as well, if you look at those papers that I referenced in the previous slides, I think you can get some additional resources from that. And then the last question we have for you, we'd like you to use the chat tool again. And we want you to list 3 words that you associate with working with students with IEPs and CTE. So just 3 words that come to mind when you hear that phrase or when you think about this topic. I'm seeing repetition, flexibility, enjoyable, sometimes challenging, rewarding, individualized, important and needed. Great, I'll give you a few more seconds. Neurodiversity, thinking outside the box. I'm seeing a lot of flexibility and individualized, which we'll touch on a little bit with the strategies. And time management, the flexibility with that. Collaboration, that's going to come up in our strategies as well. Great. Okay, thank you, everyone. And you can continue typing in if you haven't had a chance yet. I'm going to move along and talk a little bit about some background strategies. So I'm going to present about 9 to 10 strategies here, but I'm just going to put them up on the screen and let you read through the details. This is kind of high level what the working group and what research supports identified as some effective strategies. And just looking at the words that you were just putting up on the screen, I think a lot of you are probably familiar with these. So one is to differentiate instruction. Another strategy was providing professional development and really focusing on helping instructors and others understand IEPs and understand what it means to implement accommodations. A third strategy was prioritizing consistent communication and collaboration between the CTC and all the stakeholders that touch these students. So sending schools and parents, the students themselves, employers, etc. Other strategies were supporting appropriate program placement, and both Carla and Wendy will talk to this in particular today. Providing transition services for students for when they first enroll in the CTC to help smooth that process and get the supports in place right away. And then on the other side, providing for planning for post-secondary success. So how can we help with that transition? Another strategy was focusing on collaboration within the CTC. So the CTE instructors, the learning support facilitators, making sure everyone's on the same page with roles and responsibilities. We also in our working group talked about for students with significant cognitive disabilities, helping them find career options and programs that are safe and meaningful. And then the last strategy is this idea of monitoring student engagement. And of course, this would be constant and an ongoing tool to use. What I'd like to do, and this will be the last question that I have for you, but again, if you can go into the chat function, and I'll toggle back and forth between these two slides that have these strategies. But if you could just write down either a strategy that really resonates with you, one you think rises to a high level of importance, or one that you're using consistently and feel pretty good about how you use that. So again, we have the idea of differentiating instruction, professional development, communication with stakeholders, program placement services, transition services, helping to plan for post-secondary success and with that transition, collaboration within the CTC, career options and programs for students with significant cognitive disabilities, and monitoring student engagement. So just of these various strategies, which one are you either using or which one do you feel is exceptionally important? Okay, see, David mentioned transition, post-secondary success, seeing a lot of program placement. So you guys are in the right place for that. Yep, that appropriate placement is popping up a lot, and that's definitely what we heard within our working group too. Professional development for instructors, coordination and collaboration, and that's really a large one and all-encompassing. Okay, thank you. So now that I've given you kind of the broad overview of various strategies, we want to present to you some practical examples from the field, and that's where Carla and Wendy are going to come in and share their expertise with you. And so we're going to start first with Wendy Chalmers, who's a learning support teacher at Suntech. Wendy is in her 19th year with CTE. And Wendy's going to be talking about how they offer proactive support for students with IEPs in CTE. So Wendy, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, and Wendy will start by providing you a little bit of background information about Suntech and then walk you through the practices they're using. Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good morning. I'm as she mentioned, I'm the learning support teacher at Suntech. There's two of us. We have an enrollment of about 300 students. We're a small technical school in the center of the state, primarily small town. We serve 5 school districts. One is a small city. And we are a 1-year full-time career and tech center, which is a little bit different than most tech centers in Pennsylvania, but students choose to come here for primarily their senior year, although we do have a couple schools that will send some juniors. So our students come, they spend the entire day in their program, with the exception of we do offer a math course if students need a math credit. About 30% of our student population are students with IEPs. We also have some additional students with 504 plans and just students that we identify throughout the year that might need some extra help. And then we have 18 programs, including 2 health programs, because there is such a huge need for health professionals right now. And I guess that's it for the school, a little background about our school. So Suntech, many years ago, prior to actually when I was here, we identified some important needs of students. And one, of course, as most career and tech centers face, is appropriate placement. So one of our difficulties that we identified, or challenges that we identified, was the need to have students placed in the appropriate programs, both for their interests and also for their aptitudes. Students with IEPs especially struggled with appropriateness, and for a variety of different reasons, but I'll get to what kind of strategies we put in place. And then we also struggled with the fact that that the transition from the sending district to Suntech was sometimes not as smooth as I think it could have been. So we instituted a variety of different supports that would help. And so that's what I'm going to cover next. So yeah. So the first thing that we did is we decided that students needed to come and visit our school. Students with IEPs especially needed a more private tour rather than all students do the 8th grade tour. And several students will do a tour in either 10th or 11th grade, depending on the school district that they come from. But we thought that IEP students in particular, or 504 students as well, would benefit from a smaller group, more intensive tour. So we do for every 9th and 10th grader or 10th grader, so they'll come one or the other year, will come up and do what we call a VIP tour. They are usually grouped in groups of 10. The other learning support teacher and myself coordinate the tours, and when the students come, we break them into their small groups and we bring them around to each of the programs. Typically, we do not go into the programs. Sometimes teachers will invite us in. This year, we aren't allowing to go into the programs because of COVID. And last year, we weren't able to do any of these. So we have a lot of groups coming up this year to be able to go through the school. When we do those tours, we give some very specific information. So and here's an additional benefit is that the learning support teacher and the aides come up with those tour groups. So we don't do it separate. That allows us to educate the teachers and aides as well as the students. And it also makes sure that there's somebody from the school district there that knows the students. So if there is an issue, if there's some behavioral issues, we've got some added supports. So students will go through the hallway. We share things like, if you learn by hands-on and you learn by repetition, masonry might be an area that you're interested in. If you don't like to do homework and you don't like to do book work, health professions is probably an area that you don't want to come for. Or we have conversations like, what kind of skills can you work on between now and when you come up for your senior or your junior year? And sometimes it's, well, I've never welded. Well, if that's something that your school offers, then you can put that into your plan. Sometimes it's like, well, I'm not real good at math. Okay, well, if you're interested in precision machining, that's something that you probably need to work on between now and then. So it gives us a chance to have these conversations with students early when they're considering what area they want to come up for, or if they want to come up to our school. The other thing that this does is with life skills students or students that maybe are going to struggle more at our school, it exposes them to some of the careers that are available to them, so they can explore more intensely, maybe with their support teachers or with their parents, on career stepping stones, ways that they could get into the field that they're maybe interested in, but maybe they're not going to be successful at our school, or maybe they're going to really struggle. And so they may want to look at some programming before they get up here. And we do an informal assessment with that as well, where students are able to check off the programs that they're interested in, and that goes back to their home school, and that serves as another assessment that the teachers have for that student. And then the second part of what we do is when students are in 10th or 11th grade, depending on the school district. So if it's a school district that allows 11th graders to come up, then in 10th grade, they will come select 2 programs that they want to visit. We do half day in each program. Students will come up and do, let me back up. They will come up and spend a half day in a program and a half day in another program that they may be interested in. Oftentimes they'll ride the school bus with the other tech students that are coming up. So if we have students that maybe that's uncomfortable for them, they get a chance to do that. They are advised before they come up to make sure that they're in the proper clothing. So if they're coming up for welding, they can't wear shorts, they can't wear sneakers. We need them to be dressed appropriately. And then they come up, spend a day in that program, and the teachers have them go, or half day in the program. Teachers have them go through some assessment kind of criteria. So they may just shadow a student if they're not prepared to, actually weld. They might get on the virtual welder and try that. They may actually be able to help pour concrete or try to build a wall. They may do in auto tech, that instructor has them do a sample worksheet that corresponds with an article so that they can see what they will actually have to do. They'll sit through theory. If the class is doing an hour-long theory where they're sitting at their desk learning, they're going to sit through that. And then the instructor has an informal assessment page that they're able to fill out. And that provides some feedback like, how's their hygiene? Were they able to get along well with peers? Did they communicate well with the instructor? Did they pay attention? And then at the bottom of the form, it says, there's a question, what do you see as the student's strengths relevant to the program? And what do you see as the student area of need? And then we keep a copy of that assessment here at Tech, and we give a copy to the sending district. And when we get into the next strategy that we use, or one of the next strategies that we use, we will pull that assessment out again. One of the most important things that we've found over the years that has improved our rate of success for students with IEPs and appropriate placement is collaborating with the sending district. And that's not always easy. It hasn't been always easy, especially in recent years with the COVID issue, and then also with a lot of change overturn in staffing. But we've been able to manage it through a variety of ways. But one is that we make a real concerted effort to collaborate with the sending district transition coordinators. We hold IEPs. So the program instructors attend every single one of our IEPs. We write our own IEP for this school, regardless if the IEP that is currently in place is expiring or not. Prior to when the students come up here, we rewrite the IEP so that it's relevant to our program. So for instance, if the current IEP says reduce multiple choices to three choices, we remove that. Because students need to be able to pass industry certifications, and we're not reducing multiple choices. So sometimes there's supports in place that don't correctly align with career and tech ed, and we discussed that in that IEP meeting. This year, we've had almost every parent attend our IEPs. We offered it via Zoom or in person. We've had parents choose each one. But they're held at the school. So in the case like this year where students weren't able to visit, we did allow parents and students to go see the program. If it was we did these right after school was out for the most part, and then right before school started in August. So students, when we have those IEP meetings, we're able to talk about all the issues that may exist in a new setting. We can also talk about sort of red flag a student that maybe is not real sure they want to be here. We put them on a list. So we make sure on day one, we're checking in with that student, make sure the student shows up, make sure we're calling home if there's an issue. And the other benefit of doing the IEPs with the instructor there and the student there is they're creating that relationship even before they get to our school. So a lot of times we will be able to spot a student that we know we're going to need provide supports for. And we can identify barriers that they may face. So if we have a student, for instance, that has a back issue, that maybe they've had back surgery and they chose masonry, we can say, okay, well, let's make sure the instructor knows that you may need to take a break and it's a legitimate break. Or if we have a student that maybe has a visual impairment and is taking computer networking, prior to them getting to our school, we can make sure that we have some strategies in place. We have seating arranged appropriately. We have some additional tech support, that kind of thing. And then the next thing that we wanted to do is make sure that students are planning for their post-secondary success. And again, this helps with placement and appropriate placement because, as everyone knows or should know, their program choice needs to be aligned with their future goals. So we attend transition clinics. And if you're not familiar with transition clinics, you can reach out to me and I'd be happy to give you some more information on that. But it's basically where students, parents, all the stakeholders that are involved with that student get together and talk about their future goals and talk about independent living, employment, future training, whatever it is that the student needs or wants for their future success. And we usually have agencies there as well. One benefit of attending that is they're held at the sending district. So I'm going to the sending district usually, and I'm able to bring information about SunTech with me. I'm also able to answer questions of parents, school districts, and collaborate with agency support. So OVR, CareerLink, those kinds of places. And then the schools, the instructors or the support people at the sending districts are able to kind of know where a student is. So this serves multiple purposes. One, if a student is really interested in SunTech, I can say, well, say the students thinks they want to do automotive technology, but as we're talking, the student has not been successful in most of his academic classes. He has poor attendance. We can address those things sort of lightly, but say, those are concerns, and this is what's required to be successful in that program. From this, a student may decide to come up and visit, or a school may decide, oh, let's wait till their 13th year. Let's get them some more academic support, or let's get them into, maybe the student's looking at welding. Let's get them into our metal class that we offer and see if they really are able to do it and like it. And then I have notes from that. So I'm able to keep track of, a student. Maybe I get an enrollment form. I don't actually see the enrollment forms, but I get the name of a student that's enrolling. I can go back and say, ooh, there were some real concerns. Let me see where the student's at now. Those, and they're all student-led meetings. So that provides an added support for the students as well as for us to help make appropriate placements, and the sending district to help make those placements. You can go on to the next slide.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. I'll just jump in here if you don't
okay.
mind.
Yep.
If you, kind of boil everything down, maybe in one sentence, what would you say is the most important advice for other CTCs as they're thinking about how they can better support students with IEPs?
So I thought about this again last night, but I think the most important thing is partnerships and collaboration with the sending districts, with outside agency support, with the schools in general. Every school has a transition coordinator. That person is the most important connection for us in terms of making sure that students and that transition coordinator and the learning support staff are aware of what the expectations are in the Career and Tech Center. There is still a perception or misperception that by a lot of people that it's, hands-on, there's no academic work. So making sure that communication occurs, getting those teachers out to our school to see what we're really doing is really important.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. As I mentioned earlier, we have a profile that explains all that Wendy just talked about, and that is at the pactaresources.com website. And at the end of today's presentation, I'll try to take some time to take you all to that site so you can see these profiles. But what I would like to do right now is pause for a moment, and with Wendy concluding her presentation, just open it up to any questions you may have directly for Wendy, and we'll take maybe 2 or 3 minutes and then move on to Carla's presentation. So Erin, I'm not sure if you want them to post this in the Q&A or in the chat function.
I see a question in the chat that I can answer. The question is, does your CTE have an enrollment cutoff date, and do you have a cutoff for transferring between programs? And we do. And I don't know the exact date, but I know that enrollment forms have to be into our school in March. Typically, they trickle in until May 1st. May 1st is the deadline for the 5 sending districts that we have a partnership with. After May 1st, any available seats can be opened up to, there are 3 additional school districts that will send students if those programs aren't full. And after that, in a typical year, not a COVID year, we would then offer adult ed prime time student enrollment. We only allow 10 days at the start of the school year to change programs. So students from day one, they get the first week and the second week of school to make that decision. That also means they cannot go back to their home school. Typically, with IEP students, we have a little more wiggle room. They still can't change programs, but they could return to their home school.
Thank you.
And the other question I see here is, what was the programming choice you mentioned for students in life skills? I didn't. What I talked about was that if you have a student who is interested in tech and maybe as a life skills level student or a student, we do have life skills students here. But if there are students that were in life skills that maybe are at the lower end and really not able to keep up in the programs that we have, that's where we have conversations with the sending districts about what other stepping stones they could take. And sometimes it's they wait until their 13th or 14th year to come to our school. Sometimes they go to an alternative training facility to run through our IU. But we don't have any, I know some schools have like a lower career objective. We don't really have that at our school.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. And I should mention before we move on to Carla's presentation, because I don't think I mentioned this, both Wendy and Carla were part of our Special POPs working group last year and will be with us again this year. And as you can tell, they're just a wealth of knowledge. So Wendy, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and have Carla join us for her presentation. So Carla Timmons is the Special Programs Coordinator at Lenape Tech. She has 31 years of experience in CTE, 22 of which are in administration. And Carla's going to be talking to you all today about how they use work samples as authentic assessments. So again, touching on this topic of appropriate program placement. So Wendy, Carla, if you want to go ahead and start with some background information, and then we'll move into your presentation.
Good morning, everyone. I will be following the PowerPoint slides, but I'll also be adding some additional information. So Michelle, bear with me. I'll probably be prompting you to as to when to change the slides. I won't be following them exactly, but so you can see that we're a comprehensive high school and we have 4 sending districts. This year, I'm very happy to say we were able to add another instructional assistant to our support staff. So now instead of floating to 2 to 3 to 4 programs, we now have instructional assistants who can float to 1 or 2 programs, which really helps in assisting and supporting all of our students. So as far as our challenge, very similar to what Wendy was just talking about, I think similar in all CTCs, we're all looking to help students make a good fit. As far as a technical program. And when we're looking at transition and special education students, that's really where our focus is. As you can see, our numbers are commensurate with, I think, a lot of schools. About 30% of our students have IEPs. And our philosophy has always been that we don't recruit, but rather we prefer to always provide as much information as possible to students and parents and really all of our stakeholders. As you all know, it's the community at large that we really have to make sure that we give them information about our school, about all of our programs, including business and industry, the sending districts. Wendy mentioned how crucial those relationships are. They absolutely are crucial to this process of appropriate placements for students. I always like to say when we have meetings in our building, whether it's superintendents or principals or teachers and IEP meetings, folks, we need to get them out of the conference room and we need to get them into our technical programs. That's truly how they're going to understand and be aware of the expectations in those programs for all students. And hopefully that will help with the appropriate placements for all students. I wanted to just talk briefly about some of our current transition assessments, and then I'll get into how we developed work samples. Like most schools, we do tours. We also use what's called the Talent Assessment Profile, or the TAP. It's a series of hands-on tasks that really measure functional abilities. Again, it's just another way to work with those students, potential students, starting in 9th grade, to help them get a general idea of some of their skills and how they relate to different careers. We also do a vocational assessment with not only the TAP, but we do a learning and working style inventory with the students. And then we review the essential skills documents. They're on our website, which are essentially program summaries that the students can review with their parents or guidance counselors to kind of just get an overall of some of the skills that are going to be essential for them to be successful. And then shadowing, obviously we all do shadowing. But when it came to shadowing, we were continuing to look at something a little more authentic. Shadowing is great, depending on the day that the students shadow. And I know that we try to arrange that so that the students are going to see and get a good look at what's going on in that technical program. But still there was a need for us to dig a little deeper, so to speak. And we wanted something more authentic as far as being able to measure and assess a student's ability to perform, measure and assess their processes of learning, and how they apply knowledge in the actual CTE or natural environment. So I had the pleasure and distinct honor of working with Dr. Pamela LeConte, who is a guru of vocational assessment, and she is a retired professor from George Washington University. So she helped me tremendously in this effort to embark on this journey with work samples and creating them with our CTE teachers, and taught me really about authentic assessment and how important it is for the students to discover for themselves their interest in learning a particular technical program and their potential for learning. So it's a self-discovery process, and this is why we're moving towards the work samples, because they really truly did fit the bill when you look at students taking ownership and really understanding and finding out for themselves if this program is going to be a good fit. I think we've all sat in those very uncomfortable IEP meetings where we had to provide, as Wendy mentioned earlier too, some information, some concerns that were made maybe during shadowing, and that's never a pleasant experience. But when you can provide a lot of information for that student and really encourage that student to share the information about how they did during their vocational assessment, during the shadows, did they do any kind of informal or situational assessment? What feedback did they provide? What feedback did the teachers give to them when they visited? I think all those things empower the student and kind of allow them to guide and lead their own IEP meeting. So that's why we decided that work samples might be a more authentic way to approach vocational assessment and ultimately helping the student to decide for themselves if it was a good fit. So what is a work sample? It's a well-defined activity that really includes the tasks, materials, and tools which are identical or similar to that which will be used on the job. Work samples are kind of a diagnostic, if you will, because the CTE teacher, by meeting the students when they come to do the work sample, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as the presentation goes on, that the CTE teachers are able to meet the student where they are, so to speak, in terms of what they know or what they may need help with if they would enroll in their program. And I think it's very important also to note that we never want the work samples to be, or really any activity that we use for vocational assessment, to be perceived or viewed as a screening tool. As you all know, we have to be very careful with that. We don't want to deny a student because they didn't do well on the work sample. However, I do think that the value is with, again, the student and equipping them to understand how they did, take the feedback from the teacher and really share with the IEP team, why they think it's a good fit, kind of put them in the driver's seat a little more. And I think that that's the value of the work samples for sure. So what we decided to do was start by making a video of the tasks that the student would do within the CTE program when they visited. And the idea was that in addition to shadowing or tours that have taken place, the students could get online. We would have a video of the CTE program and the actual task that the student would be expected to perform when they came into the program, and then make arrangements for them to do so. We've since moved on and have decided that the videos were a little bit too time intensive and maybe weren't as valuable as we initially thought, but definitely the tryout and the actual component where the student shadows and then comes over to do the actual work sample with the teacher is where we find the most benefit. So the student would watch the instructor, say for instance, the precision machining instructor, show them and demonstrate how to use a micrometer, how to sharpen the tools, and then the student would perform those tasks with the instructor making those observations. So again, all this is to help a student determine for themselves if it's a good fit. And that last bullet, I think, is very profound, because what we're finding is when they come over to do the work sample, and we've piloted a few between last year and what we anticipate this year, so we're still in the infancy stages of implementing the work samples. That student gets to experience everything, the sounds, the smells, and all components of that work environment, where depending on when they shadow, sometimes that's just not possible, again, contingent upon what's happening in the program that day. But when the teachers created their work samples, they made sure that they incorporated not only the safety aspects and everything that the student would be expected to perform, but also tried to create that experience where the sights, the sounds, the smells were all there for the student to actually experience. So it was much more concrete. So we took a year of professional development, and we have professional development Fridays where the students are dismissed at about 12:46, and then we have professional development for our teachers for the remaining 2 hours. So that year, about 4 years ago, we used the entire year for professional development off and on Fridays for the CTE teachers. And we gave them a step-by-step guide where they essentially determined, and we used some guiding questions, what work skills and tasks did they want to include in their work sample when the students visited. And some of the guiding questions that we asked them to consider were, what do students need to be able to do in their field? What can they build on? What activity is part of their regular work routine in the CTE program? And what is a skill that they teach early in the year that I want the students to be able to use consistently? And so we had a template developed, and then from that guide, they developed their work sample. So last year, we piloted 3 work samples in the areas of precision machining, allied health and sports medicine, and collision repair technology. And 2 of the 3 work samples were students that had been in placement and had not been in a traditional high school for 3 to 4 years, let alone a CTE type of environment. So the work samples were very beneficial. 2 of the 3 students did visit, and as I mentioned, we're from different placements. And when they visited the program, 2 of the 3 students found that it was
end of CCR.
what they wanted to do, that they felt it was a good fit. The teachers provided feedback, and then the students at their IEP meetings kind of walked through the process with our guidance to share all the information from when they toured, shadowed, when they did the interest inventory, they did the TAP activities, which again were the series of hands-on tasks, and then they did the work sample. One of the students said that he knew he needed to concentrate on measurement because he realized when the precision machine teacher was demonstrating the micrometer that he really needed to brush up on his skills. So it was really revealing for that student as far as maybe some things that he could do over the summer. It also helped the precision machining teacher in this instance meet that student where he was, so to speak. He understood that he had not been in an environment for many years that was unstructured as our simulated work environments of our technical programs are and can be. And so helped him work through some of the safety aspects and some behaviors and some things along those lines. And it really ended up where the feedback from the teacher that was shared at the IEP meeting and the student himself going through all the information, really, he really took the ownership of his meeting, and it worked out very well. Again, we've only piloted a few of them. We're hoping to get more referrals from the school districts. I've asked them again to start referring students much earlier because I think that then the students have a carrot in front of them, so to speak. They understand the expectations. They visited our program. They've done a work sample and realized what the math requirements were, the reading requirements, and would work towards their goal of getting to Lenape. So that's how we're hoping to continue to use them. Now, as far as how we implement them too, we're very fortunate to have 4 days a week, a time that the students can, we call it TAP, Teacher Advisor Program, where the students can work on enrichment activities and their academics or in their technical program. It's when our clubs meet. We use it that 4 day a week intervention period. It's about 52 minutes for a variety of activities. And this is when we also will implement the work samples, and we'll have the students visit. And I just get the CTE instructor coverage for their TAP group, which is essentially a group of 10 to 12 students. And then this allows the instructor to work one-on-one with the student who's doing the work sample. And again, that's been very helpful. But we do have that time during the Monday through Thursday where they could actually give the work sample. As far as challenges, I talked about the video. We just came to the conclusion it was just really too time intensive
period or a lunch,
and not necessarily as beneficial as we had thought. So we're focusing on just creating the actual work samples. We've had some turnover, some new staff, and they're working on creating their own work samples so that they too can implement them at some point. And as far as the benefits, you look at a minimal cost for, the supplies are already there. They're already setting up these demonstrations without any extra cost. So it works out nicely. It's really, again, as I mentioned, a concrete experience more than shadowing, because they're actually performing tasks that they will be expected to perform to industry standards at some point. And again, that student ownership is so important in helping the sending school district to understand that all these vocational activities, including the work samples when appropriate for students, really can help the student to guide their own decision-making process and share that information at their actual IEP meeting in the spring.
Thank you, Carla. I'm sorry I jumped ahead on you there at the end. I wanted to ask you the same question I had posed to Wendy. Taking all of what you do into consideration, what would you boil down as the most important advice for other CTCs as they serve students with IEPs?
Well, there are so many.
Yeah.
Again, starting with the relationships that, again, I know Wendy also emphasized this, but it's true. They need to understand the sending district personnel. They need to understand our programs. When we have tours, we try to make sure that the guidance counselors from the sending school districts or with the tour groups, learning support teachers, regular ed teachers. They're pretty good about bringing along those folks so that we can include them in the tours so that they can understand. They're talking to a lot of students in the sending districts. They need to understand our expectations. So those relationships are critical. And then lastly, I would say, trying to teach the student to drive their own IEP meeting in terms of transition, equipping them with all the information from whatever vocational assessment activities you may do in your school, and showing them how it all relates and makes a pathway to either a career and technical program that you offer, or sometimes the information we provide for the teams directs the student in another direction. Usually it's our schools. We all know there's not a lot of other opportunities sometimes, depending on where you're located, that your career and tech school is transition for a lot of these students. But at least we have those relationships where we can have those conversations with the students, guiding their meetings a little more and equipping them to do that with all the information that we're hoping to provide.
Thank you, Carla. And again, Carla's, the profile about these work samples is on the pactaresources.com site so that you can read it in more detail, and her contact information is on there as well. And Carla, I'm seeing a few questions come in, so I will go ahead and read them to you, and we have a few minutes for you to respond to them. So one question, do you have these tryout visits on days that there are no other students in the building? How do you limit the students who participate in the shadowing opportunity?
Okay, so as far as the work sample tryouts, the students are in the building. Oftentimes, again, we've only implemented a half dozen of these, 3 last year and in a couple of the year prior, but the students were in the building, and sometimes the senior students, as an enrichment activity, the CTE instructor will utilize these students to either set up the work sample areas where the demonstrations are going to occur, and sometimes assist the teacher. So there are students in the building, and we're very fortunate, as I mentioned, to have that intervention period 4 days a week, which all I have to do then is get that CTE teacher coverage, and they can, during that TAP period, that intervention period, work with that student who's doing the work sample. As far as the second part of that question, how do you limit the students who participate in the shadowing opportunity? The guidance counselors at Lenape work with the guidance counselors at the sending district to organize shadowing, and it hasn't been a problem. We permit as many students as possible, but with COVID, obviously, we make sure that we are having smaller groups. So that hasn't been an issue. We have excellent communication with the shadowing event between the sending districts. I see another question there. Is there a goal for all students to complete a work sample? Right now, we are concentrating on the students who maybe are a little more at risk, who maybe do not fully understand the expectations. Sometimes we get calls from the sending district, a learning support teacher that will say that a student, or she will say, or he will say, a student may be interested in welding, for example, and they don't necessarily know that their behaviors or their understanding of safety, their degree of readiness in that regard is where it would need to be. So we may have them start the process of vocational assessment a little earlier, but right now it's more for those students who are a little more at risk or not maybe contemplating or not able to make a decision as far as what they're really interested in. So that work sample gives them an opportunity to really try it out and see for themselves if it's something that they want to do.
Great. Thank you, Carla. That's all the questions I'm seeing right now, but we do have a few more minutes. So if you think of something you'd like to ask Carla or Wendy, go ahead and write that in your chat box. I'm going to take a quick moment at the end of this presentation now to show you, hopefully, let's see if we can do this. It may have gone on me. Let's see. I'm going to go back and hopefully show you the website. So let me just find a link to it. I apologize. We'll go here. There we go. Okay. Carla, since I can see you, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the PACTA resources? Thank you. Okay, so this is what I was referencing quite a lot throughout today's session. This is where we've uploaded many profiles, again, on all different categories. So we have leadership up here, adult CTE, student engagement. And if you scroll all the way down, you're going to see the special populations tab. So if I wanted to find out about some practices related to individuals with disabilities, I would click on that. And you're going to see that there's a webcast series we did, which I believe is Wendy and Carla again. And we have various profiles. So here's another one from Suntech about their student awareness team. This is Carla's that she just talked about, the Lenape Tech one. So if I click on that, you're going to get a written summary of exactly what she just explained. So it's going to go into detail and you can read through it. And at the bottom, you're going to see Carla's contact information if you wanted to follow up with her. So I encourage you to check out this website. It has a wealth of resources on it. You'll also see some of the strategy papers that I talked about as well. So this is the working paper that came out of the Special POPs working group. This is highly detailed and worth a read when you get some time. And so then also I'm going to plug, if you go all the way to the bottom, there's a submit a resource button. If you think you are doing something that others should hear about, if you click on submit a resource, it's going to take you to a form that you can fill in and tell about your practice. It doesn't have to be a big grand practice, but perhaps it's just something you're doing particularly well and effectively. And you would fill this in with some details, click submit, and that comes directly to me. And then I would follow up with you, get some additional information, and I would write up the profile so that we could upload it to this site. So I just encourage you to give some thought. If there's something you want to share with others, please consider submitting a form to me and I would be in touch with you. And so with that, let's see. That is the conclusion of our presentation. Again, if you have any follow-up questions, email me and also check out the pactaresources.com website. But thank you all so much for joining us today, and a very special thank you to Wendy and Carla for sharing all your information with us. I appreciate it.